Good evening to you both. Let's begin with Elections Alberta approving an application for a citizen-led referendum initiative. And the question, do you agree that Alberta should remain in Canada? The initiative, the work of former Progressive Conservative Deputy Premier and Cabinet Minister Thomas Lukaszuk, and aims to push to halt the push by separatists, with approval being granted ahead of new referendum rules kicking in this Friday. This petition must meet old requirements, meaning Lukaszuk will need to collect nearly 300,000 signatures instead of the new figure of 177,000. Graham, we'll start with you. 294,000 signatures. We're now into the summer slowdown window. How steep a hill do you think this Thomas Lukaszuk-led Forever Canada initiative faces?
Well, it's a big uphill fight, perhaps. We'll see. This is an issue, though, people care about. This is an issue that's easy to understand. It's not like a question about equalization that Kenney put to voters a few years ago, Jason Kenney, the former premier. But this is about, of course, separation. And now Albertans, clearly, the polls have shown they're against separation. We saw that by-election result in Old Didsbury Three Hills just a few days ago, that the separatist-leaning party, the Republican Party of Alberta, got about 18% of the vote, finished behind the NDP. So people do not want the province to separate. And the thing is, now can Lukaszuk get the ground game going to get people's names? It's not just a name; it has to be the name, has to be the address, has to be verifiable by Elections Alberta. It's a steep hill to climb, and of course, nipping on his heels is going to be the other guys who who are pro-separatist, who want their own referendum question. It's a bit of a race now to see who can do it first. And the separatists, if I can call them that, the pro-separatists, they only have to get only 177,000 vote names, whereas Lukaszuk has 300,000. So he needs a really strong ground game. He says he has that, but he is asking for volunteers to help him out.
John, what do you make of the formulation of the question? Do you agree that Alberta should remain in Canada? And how do you see that resonating with Albertans?
Yeah, I think the question is fine. It's pretty obvious. It's a clear question. That's always important when it comes to the sort of thing. And an endorsement of the status quo is generally easier to get people to buy into because it's the default, rather than agreeing to some kind of change, especially as momentous of a change as secession. The issue is that, he has this steeper, taller mountain to climb, as opposed to the separatists, right? And I can't help but think that there's a theme of unintended consequences here where, well, what if he doesn't get his signatures first? Does that make the Federalist movement, if we want to call it that, appear weaker? Does that give credence to the separatist cause? I think there are sort of other elements here at play than just, can he get signatures?
Graham, how does this play politically as the summer barbecue circuit hits full stride? Yeah. It's Calgary Stampede now, just days away. And there's also about to play out, front and center, is this Alberta Next panel that the Premier will lead.
Yeah, I know. And we'll be discussing, of course, the by-election with Pierre Poilievre also taking place over the summer. You got a lot of things happening. Alberta politics does not slow down, ever. And it's been like that way for over a decade. And I mean that literally. Is just every day something new is happening. Yeah, so we got the barbecue season starting. And will people be paying attention to this? I think the clearest issue, it's not, the Alberta Next panel, it's not even the Pierre Poilievre by-election. People will be, I think, maybe more interested, more involved in the idea of a separatist vote, for separation, for or against. That's something that's clear, but will it cut through the background noise in the summer? That's always a challenge. And I agree with John when he's talking about, what happens if this stumbles? What happens if Lukaszuk can't get the number of people, that the voices or the names signing up? That does, to me, then hand some of the momentum to the other guys. So this is a race now in summer when people are focused on the barbecue season. Other things are going on in politics. So the question is going to be, will they pay attention to this? Are they paying attention to this? And that's a question that Lukaszuk's going to find out pretty quickly the answer to.
So John, how do you see campaigns for and against this Lukaszuk-led petition playing out? Do they generate hot headlines? Are they out there right front and center, or do they play out in the background because it's summer?
Yeah, I think they do. They do play out in the background because it's summer, and doubly so for the status quo campaign. Let's keep things the same isn't exactly the sexiest campaign slogan, and a lot of and because it is the default option to stay in Canada, a lot of the folks who are going to vote that way, regardless of which referendum question gets put to the population, are probably off, on camping trips with their families and going away for the summer and spending time at the lake and in the mountains, and as opposed to the people who are really galvanized for their cause, which are the separatists. They're going to be very motivated, and these people already have their lists because it's the same list that various right-wing organizing groups have. It just gets circulated around, and I think they have the edge there, right? Not just in terms of having a smaller hurdle to get over, but motivation and organization. And so I think both campaigns are going to be sort of in the background as the summer plays out. But I think the separatist movement, just because it's the more more sensational, more exciting movement, is going to be having an easier time organizing than I think Lukaszuk's Remain campaign.
Okay, Graham, last question to you on this one. What kind of position does this petition leave the Smith government in? Does the Premier address it?
No, she said, look, she's not a separatist. She's not getting involved. If Albertans want to bring forward questions on separation, that's really up to them. But she's trying to take one step back. Of course, she's being, to me, disingenuous because she's lowered the bar to have a referendum on separation. The Alberta Next panel, even though, again, she's saying, look, we'll focus on things like Alberta pension plan and police force. And the thing is, though, the Alberta Next, though, that does help generate for the separatists this feeling that Ottawa is to blame for everything. And that rhetoric from the Premier we heard very loud and clear the day she announced the names of that Alberta Next panel. She was saying, I don't want to prejudge the outcome of this panel, but then she launched into this attack on the federal government, saying they're being really unfair to Alberta for the last 10 years. So that's going to help, I think, the rhetoric for the separatist side to say, see, the Premier is pointing out all the problems right now with this confederation. So that's going to help them, I think, when it comes to generating some headlines and some motivation behind people who might then actually put their name down on a petition to have a referendum.
We heard from Rahim Jaffer off the top tonight, the former multi-term member of Parliament, now adding his name to the roster of candidates seeking the mayor's chair in Edmonton. John, how do you see Rahim Jaffer fitting into this mayoral race? What kind of weight does he bring, having been out of the political spotlight for going on maybe more than 15 years ago now? I have to do my math.
Yeah, I could see him potentially being a factor. I mean, the reality is that politics these days is a vocation. I don't think being a career politician is necessarily a bad thing. And he does have a lot of experience. He has his skeletons in his closet. But as he said, they're all out now, and everybody knows, right? So that part of him is a known quantity. And he's been doing things. He's been running a business, right? He's been raising a family. And so, the narrative fits. And you see that he's really thought that through in the interview, right? And so, yeah, I mean, he does have a lot of political experience. To have won a solidly progressive seat in the heart of Edmonton, several elections in a row is nothing to scoff at, right? At the provincial level, that same area is the safest NDP seat in the province, right? So for him to carry that federally is no small feat, right? And that shows that he has the organizational ability, and whether he still has those networks to tap into, we'll find out. But no, I think he does have the potential to be a very big factor.
So, Graham, has enough time passed for Jaffer to get beyond the controversies that dogged him in the past, have an opportunity to campaign competitively?
Well, it's interesting. In your interview, he's talking about his baggage, very embarrassing baggage. He calls, hey, it's experience. I learned things from the past. Okay, a second chance. The thing is, he's not well known. He's not. Yes, he's was an MP at one point. That's a long time ago. People have very short memories. People don't really pay attention to politics. Another thing he's got to overcome, and that is, of course, Smith has allowed political parties now to run in civic elections in Edmonton and Calgary. And you've got Tim Cartmel, who's well known in the political circles in Edmonton. He has an entire slate. And the slates, they can raise more money. They have people campaigning. They have a lot more volunteers working as a group. And you can say we shouldn't be having, political parties at the civic level. Absolutely not a problem in terms of my point of view, arguing that. But that's too late now. This is a fact of life. There are political parties now running slates of candidates, Edmonton and Calgary. And you've got people, like I mentioned, Tim Cartmel, who has that. And that's going to help him tremendously, as opposed to independents like Rahim Jaffer. There's like half a dozen now names out there. And because, yes, Rahim Jaffer has experience in the past, he left under a cloud. I would say people don't really know who he is. He's got a real uphill battle. Speaking of uphill battles we're talking about, this is a major one for him because he's up against yet another wrinkle or another obstacle for independent candidates when it comes to actually getting a campaign together, when you have now slates of candidates running because of changes to the election laws brought in by the Smith government.
Shaping up to be a very interesting mayoral race in Edmonton. Okay, for us, one more topic, that is setting the stage for Pierre Poilievre's return to the House of Commons. The Prime Minister announcing Monday a by-election will take place August 18th in the Alberta riding of Battle River Crowfoot.
He has to run somewhere, and of course this riding is probably the most secure riding.
The area we're in is very conservative, so it's probably better that it stays that way.
Damien Currick has represented the riding since 2019, but resigned last month to give Pierre Poilievre another chance to run after the Conservative leader lost his Ottawa area seat in the last federal election just over 9 weeks ago. And just how safe is Battle River Crowfoot? Well, there we see it. Currick won the riding with nearly 83% of the vote. Graham, how smooth sailing do you expect this by-election race to be for Pierre Poilievre? How much effort will he need to put into this?
Well, he will win it. I'm making that prediction right now. My fearless prediction is going to win. It could be a very low turnout. Again, we're talking about the barbecue season. People aren't paying attention to politics. It could be a low turnout. He's going to win this. The issue is going to be for him, what kind of campaign is he going to run in terms of his rhetoric? The separatist feeling, especially in rural Alberta, he's going to play into that. He said, no, he is not a separatist, but he understands the separatist and alienation feeling among Albertans. So he has to be careful. He doesn't have to pander to them. He'll win the election because of the Conservative momentum and not riding to the left, about 30, 40, 50, really 100 years, basically. So the thing is, the question really for him, to me, isn't the by-election. He's going to win that. The question is, then what? He gets a seat back in the House of Commons, but then how does he then reconnect with Canadians? He lost the election, and he lost his own seat. There'll be a leadership review in January for the party. So to me, the bigger hurdles are coming up. I don't see the by-election being a hurdle for him at all.
John, how do you see this issue of separation factoring into the campaign trail conversations? What kind of pressure might that put on Team Poilievre?
Yeah, it's going to be pressure from the far right wing, which he heavily courted to secure the Conservative Party leadership, right? I mean, he was there on the front lines of the convoy blockade in Ottawa, right? And it probably cost him his seat in Carleton. And so it's going to be tricky because they're probably going to try and bait him a little bit. And he's going to have to test his willpower to make sure that he, both like avoids too strong of a repudiation of these folks, right? Because he can't disavow everything that they stand for because they are his people. But at the same time, like, he can't be seen as playing footsie too much with them because that's going to have repercussions for the Conservative Party in the rest of the country, right? But it's a delicate balancing act because if he doesn't throw enough carrots their way, so to speak, right? Like they could mount a challenge to his leadership, and we might see the same kind of left wing versus right wing within the Conservative tent erupt again. So he's going to have to walk that tightrope.
Graham, last only 30 seconds for you, but how much effort do you see the Liberals putting behind their candidate, Darcy Spady, an engineer working in the energy sector who grew up in the riding?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of effort because, yeah, you mentioned 80%, 83%. The Conservatives won last time. The opposition, I can call it that, the other guys get less than 10%. The Liberals have a candidate, but they're not going to put a lot of time and effort into this kind of wasted cause. The Conservatives, my great prediction is that they're going to win this by-election.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Thank you kindly.
Good to be here.
You're welcome.